Do all of you know your grade? All of you know your grade already. All right. I'll pass these back to you. These are in no particular kind of order. And as you come up, you may pick up a test booklet. Look over them good. Clarence. All right. Evan. Cynthia. Mignon. Jackie. You have to pick up a test if you wish. Zolma. Lauren. Lillian. Daniel. Jonathan. Leonard. Jessica. Soo-young. Gage. All right, is there anyone in here who did not get yours? Okay, let me double check this. I'm missing Jamie, Min, Daniel, Zolma, Clarence, Lauren. Okay, the rest are you be counted present. All right. If anyone has any question about any one of them, or anyone you think that I did not go over in class, or anything that you don't believe is in the book, I don't think there is such a question, but oh yeah, you're welcome to double check the math behind me. The curve was 18 points. So what you do is take the number you missed, multiply that by 3, subtract that from 100. In other words, you missed 6, multiply that by 3, 18. Subtract 18 from 100 and get 82, then add 18 points back, and your score would be 100 if you missed 6. So everybody in here missed at least 6. If you missed 7, your score would be a 97. If you missed 8, your score would be a 94. And if you missed 9, your score would be a 91. All right. I almost ran myself late today. All right, anybody have any questions, comments? Again, I don't think anyone is surprised by the grade. They were posted on iCollege. On Wednesday night, actually, I went ahead and posted them after I got home, late Wednesday. All right, look over for a few more minutes. Oops, I've made a mistake already. All right. Okay, anybody need more time to look at it? If not, that would be chaos. All right, let's go. I'll just take it up. Clarence, is that right? Huh? Oh, wait a minute. I got you mixed up. Laura. Okay. Oh, let me see how you see it. So, Laura. Okay. Which color did you have? Red? Okay, I'll take you back to the computer. These are real trying to get out before I leave. I just want to get started. Okay. All right, we're on the chapter on Between the Wars, particularly the Asia, Africa, the Middle East, and Turkey, that part of the world. In other words, the non-American, the non-United States and non-European part of the world between the wars. On Wednesday of last week, we talked about the Ottoman Empire, went from there to Iran. All right. Colonialism was becoming unpopular. So the Britain and France got together. They were the big winners in World War I, and they said, we're not going to conquer these people, we're going to make a mandate. In other words, the word mandate means we're going to get these people ready for the 20th century. It was the 20th century then. And then we'll give them their independence. They have to modernize and update. So France took over Syria. They didn't say take over. Supposedly they gave Syrians a lot of independence. Britain took over Iraq and Egypt. Iran was still called Persia, but Britain also took over Egypt. Now, when Britain took over this part of the world, they had a little country in here called Palestine. Some people believe that word Palestine comes from the word Philistine. And any of you who know your Bible history know that the Philistines were the avowed enemies to the Israelis. And in fact, the giant Goliath was a Philistine, the one whom David knocked down with a sling. Anyway, Palestine was known to be the ancient home of the Jewish people, and the Zionist movement told the world, the Jews told the world, we want to establish our ancient homeland back in Palestine where it was before. Again, I believe we talked about Zionism earlier. Now, this was not to become a reality until 1948. And this period covers up between 1919 and 1939. But a bunch of Jewish people continued to trickle into Palestine. And when they would move in, they would live on land that the Palestinians were not using. Live on land that Palestinians were not using, and they continued to filter in. Great Britain, right after World War I, gave the famous Balfour Declaration. Now, you may not realize, folks, what I'm talking about is extremely important now in the year 2014. Because in these years, 1919 to 1938, the groundwork was being laid for the formation of the State of Israel. Eventually, the Jews did move in, and they took over part of Palestine, and they set up the nation of Israel. But that was not until after World War II. So we're going to be talking about this because, again, this was extremely important. Now, the Arabs have a law that once a territory has belonged to them, that territory can never be taken away. In other words, they always own it. For instance, the Muslims once owned Spain. King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella drove them out. We talked about that at the beginning of the semester. But to this day, the Muslims hold a grudge against the Spanish. We're going to get Spain back. The Muslims once had Greece, and they say we're going to get Greece back. In the case of Palestine, they especially are angry at the Jews because they say that the Jews never had a right to be there. In fact, they say the Jews have no right to even exist. But the Jews slowly moved in, and again, this area was under control of Great Britain. Great Britain, the Balfour Declaration said that promised the Jews that they would be in a homeland established in Palestine. All right, Jewish homeland. Well, when the British saw that the Arabs were so hard against it, Great Britain reneged on its promise and did not give the Jews a homeland in Palestine. Now, this was to eventually lead to the Holocaust of World War II, where that Hitler and killed millions of Jews. 6 million is the number given. And after that, the Jews were more determined than ever to go to Palestine and set up a homeland. But in this period of time, the dream was not realized. The dream of a Jewish state in their old ancestral home in Israel was not to be realized until after the time period we're talking about. Now, the Balfour Declaration was confirmed by the League of Nations, which we talked about, that the League of Nations, something the United States would not join, but they confirmed that, yes, the Jews should have a homeland in Palestine. And the British reneged, and it was not done until 1948. Now, I want to state this, folks. Now, I don't know if there are any Arabs or Arab sympathizers in here or not, but I want to state this for the record. There has never been a nation formed more legally than the nation of Israel. Israel ultimately wound up being formed by the United Nations, a vote of the nations of the world, and more than 2/3 of the world's countries voted to create a partition and partition the land of Palestine and give part of it to the Jews and part to the Arabs. You might say, wasn't this theft from the Arabs? Not really. But for one thing, number one, we in Americans, those of us who are Americans, are living on land that was once owned by the American Indians. Every human being alive today is living on land that his ancestors took from somebody else. There's hardly an exception. It's just the order of things. But in the case of Israel, The Israelis did not come in and take the land the Arabs were using. They merely moved in on vacant land that was not being used. Now, folk, if you ever go find a vacant lot or a vacant house and decide to buy it, you're doing exactly what the Jewish people did. Bought a lot that was not being owned by anybody, not being used by anybody, nobody owned it. Whereas maybe somebody owned, but they were willing to sell it. So they simply moved into the vacant lot and they began farming it. The Arabs had had it for centuries, 1,400 or so years, and had never been able to make this land a productive farmland. In fact, Mark Twain visited Palestine in the 1870s or thereabouts. He said, this land, to be the land of God, is the most unproductive, unyielding land. Then the Jews moved in. And they transformed the land into a blossoming, productive garden. It was said that the Jews realized that some of the soil was alkaline, so they took the soil one bucket at a time, washed away the alkalinity, and put the soil back in place. When they were through with the land, it was productive. Again, something the Arabs had not been able to do in 1,400 years. But this Jewish state wound up being created by a United Nations mandate, something that the United States cannot claim, something that France and England cannot claim. I mean, after all, England is now inhabited by mostly Germanic people who drove the Britons out. France, the Franks moved in and drove out the original inhabitants, the Gauls and the Celts. There are hardly any Celts anymore. The fact is, everybody on the face of the earth is living on land that was taken from somebody else. The Arabs are very sore about it, and they vowed we're going to take it back, and we're going to drown all the Jewish people in the sea. And that's where the situation is today. There's one big reason the Arabs have not been able to do it. And that is the Arabs, with all due respect, they spend more time fighting each other than they do fighting other people. And right today, what do we have? Syria is fighting Syria. Egypt is fighting Egypt. Tunisia is fighting Tunisia. Libya is fighting Libya. Iran is fighting Iran. If you get my picture, folks. They're spending all their time fighting each other, and therefore they can't get together long enough to fight Israel. I'm going to have more to say about it later as to why Israel's been able to win. Right, there's another reason. Israel got its weapons from the United States. The Arab world got their weapons from the Soviet Union. Soviet-made weapons do not work very well. Their rifles do now, their pistols do, but their tanks, their planes, their submarines, their heavy artillery do not work very well. And the result is Israel, with better weaponry, has been able to blow the Arabs off the battlefield until it's been about 40 years since the Arabs actually faced Israel in a real confrontation. But anyway, it had its roots right here. Actually, it had its roots way back in the ancient world. Some people say the roots of the problem go all the way back to Abraham, when Abraham sent Ishmael away and gave the promise to his younger son Isaac. You can believe what you want to. But the roots for this conflict go all the way back to the beginning of history, folks. All right. Anyway, I want you to remember the word Zionist, Balfour Declaration, promised by the English ambassador, Lord Balfour, and the League of Nations affirmed it, but the League did not enforce it, and Israel did not get its homeland at that time. In Egypt, Britain tried to form a democratic government, a representative government. Here's the problem, though. In the Arab world, democracy has proven to be virtually impossible. And again, interesting, we don't hear as much about Egypt as we did a year ago, but the Egyptians are still fighting against each other. And with the Egyptians fighting each other, the peace treaty that Jimmy Carter worked out between Egypt and Israel appears to have broken down. But again, the Egyptians can't go to war against Israel because they're too busy fighting among themselves.